Hello and welcome. So no, we're live.
I know, it's amazing. Welcome back. And we are live.
We are live.
We're
We've even got the on-air sign on.
Yeah.
It's been a while. We have missed you guys over the past 2 weeks, but we are excited to be back live, just to fill you in on some things, answer some questions, update you about what's coming up. So yeah, obviously the last 2 weeks have been quite different. You guys have been watching a pre-recorded show of Tuesday Night Live. And yeah, we just wanted to say thank you. If you have been able to watch it, you have been able to come along. Obviously it's been different for you guys and it's not the same live.
No, it's definitely not the same.
Yeah, so it's a lot harder. But if you have tuned into the shows, good on you, because we are very encouraged by that. And obviously we're going to come back to being live next week, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But the last 2 weeks we've kind of continued on in Hebrews looking at things. This week particularly, we got to have that fun kind of outside look at looking at the Tabernacle.
Yes, with the creative kind of Bible reading.
Which I think was really helpful. I think sometimes when we read those 16 chapters about the Tabernacle, we can't visualise it. It's just very different for us. So it was nice to kind of have it drawn a little bit for us.
I think unless you've done a lot of camping, you can't understand, a
well,
big tent.
It's glamping, didn't you say? It's more glamping than camping.
It's more like beach mission with the massive marquees, yes.
That's very true. So we're going to get into some questions that we actually had from this week's talk, but also from previous things from Andrew. And we're going to start with Andrew. So he asked this question a little while ago and we said, wait, just be patient.
Bible reading group?
From the Bible reading group. And so he was asking to shed some light on the Tabernacle, why it was made so particularly, why God was so particular about it, particularly in how it was accessed and why it was so complicated, but also how then does Jesus satisfy that? So can you help us out now that we have looked at the Tabernacle and what's going on there?
And I think you can see this week's talk has ticked a whole lot of those boxes for those questions about the Tabernacle. I think some of the reasons it's so complex is because of what it represents. And so it was so important to use the best materials and to create this very complex thing because it represented God's dwelling with his people, among his people, and his relationship with them. And that's incredibly important. This is the God of the universe, the God who created all of us. And so our connection to him is important. And so that's why the tabernacle and later the temple were such complex beasts in a sense, and it was so important to get them exactly right and use those materials. And I think as well we've seen that shift in the New Testament towards why Jesus is the fulfillment. That very particular reference that I think we touched on in John chapter 1, where it talked about the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. He pitched his tent among us. That Jesus is that presence or fellowship of God amongst his people. And so the incarnation, Jesus, and that's why the purpose of the tabernacle has been fulfilled. It's why the curtain of the temple, I think, was torn in two when Jesus died, because he gave us by his death that access to God, that the tabernacle, in a sense, denied us. That curtain in the tabernacle and later in the temple was a denial of complete fellowship and access. So God was there amongst us, but we still couldn't get to him. Whereas in Jesus, not only has God come to us, but he's opened the way for us. And so we're going to see that in a couple of weeks' time when we get back around to Hebrews 8 to 10 and have a look at those things in more detail.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I did really enjoy actually the fact that we talked about the tabernacle in Hebrews and then the 16 chapters in Exodus, and then even in my own personal Bible reading in Ezekiel, again the tabernacle came up when they were returning to the land and having to rebuild it, and I was just like, there is so much detail involved in it. Very helpful. Okay, now we're going to jump to a bit more particular from Ryan. He's asking specifically about the bread and the lampstand in the tabernacle. Obviously, we saw that in the picture when it came up. Very interesting two things to be put in the tabernacle.
Yes. And
I think he's asking a bit about why are they there? What's the reason behind it? But he also makes a connection to Jesus and two things that Jesus says about himself, that he is the bread of life and that he is the light of the world. So can you help Ryan and us out who are wondering the same sort of thing?
Okay, I'm not sure I can, but let me give it a go. So Ryan's referenced two particular items that were found in the first room And so in the first room, the holy place, not the most holy place, you had two particular items. There's an altar in there of incense, a few other things, but there's a lampstand and there's a showbread. And he picks up those two items and says, what's the significance of those two items in the tabernacle? What's their symbolism? And I think quite honestly, with the lampstand, I'm not sure there is any unique symbolism other than the fact that it sheds light. And so you've got a tent that's quite complex and layered, and so it's going to be very dark. The lamp is there to provide light for the priests to do their job and to do their service. There might be some symbolism in the fact that it's is it a seven kind of candelabra set up,
and so completely in gold as well.
Yeah. And so obviously, I think the craftsmanship and the gold on it is about its specialness, the specialness of this whole building, and because of God. I think the number of 7 probably has something to do with the idea that 7 represents perfection or completeness, but it's really just a light, and I think it just sheds light in the room. And I don't think there's any other particular symbolism to it. The showbread, on the other hand, does have some significance, and you see it not in Exodus where the tabernacle is built, but later on in Leviticus when it's talking about the role of the priest. So Leviticus 24 is going to come up on the screen. And let me find it here for myself because I can't see the screen, and so I'll actually look up Leviticus 24 for myself. But have a look at chapter 24, verse 5. It says, "Take fine flour and bake 12 loaves of bread, using 2/10 of an ephah for each loaf. Set them in 2 rows, 6 in each row, on the table of pure gold before the Lord." And getting verse 8. "This bread is to be set out before the Lord regularly, Sabbath after Sabbath, on behalf of the Israelites as a lasting covenant." And you can see that the bread does symbolise something. There are 12 loaves, I think, to symbolise the 12 tribes. Yeah. And so that's very clear. But it symbolises Israel's fellowship with God, their covenant with God. And this is part of their covenant with him. So God makes a covenant with Israel to be their God, to save them and bring them into the land, and to care for them and rescue them. And Israel makes a covenant with God to be his people. And this is a sign of their relationship with him and their commitment towards him in the covenant. And that bread then is to be eaten by the priests. So it's set out each week freshly to symbolise the covenant. So the bread is a symbol, whereas the light, I think, is just a light. Now, write us a second question that you brought up, which is about the Gospel of John. So in the Gospel of John, Jesus is famous for his I am statements. I am the light of the world. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so he's famous for saying those things. And Ryan's saying, is there a connection between 2 particular statements? I am the light of the world in John chapter 8, and I am the bread of life in chapter 6, and these 2 items in the tabernacle. And I kind of want to say, quick, simple answer is, nah. I don't think there is a direct connection. So in terms of the light of the world, because I think the light in the tabernacle is very simply a light, I don't think that symbolises anything particular. I think the light Jesus is referring to in John chapter 8 is the light of creation, the light of the Creator, the God who said, "Let there be light." And Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." And what he's doing is he's connecting creation and redemption, if you like. And he's saying, I am the God who created the light, and I am the one who gives light to the world. Yeah. And so he who believes in me will walk in the light of life, he says. And so I think that idea of light there, it comes up in John chapter 1 as well, that idea of Jesus being the creator. And I think it's actually a reference to creation itself. Okay. The second reference, I'm the bread of life, I don't think is a reference to the bread in the tabernacle. It's a reference to the manna in the desert. And you even see that in chapter 6. So in chapter 6, when there's this back and forth over the feeding of the 5,000, that's the miracle that happens in John chapter 6. That's the kind of preface to this whole kind of I am the bread of life episode. And the Jews in chapter 6 actually even say this. They ask Jesus, verse 30, "What miraculous sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? What will you do? Our forefathers ate the manna in the desert. As it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." And Jesus said to them, "I tell you the truth, it's not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but my Father. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." And so when Jesus says, "I am the bread of life," I think he's actually, the thing he's referring to from Exodus is not the showbread in the tabernacle. It's actually the manna that God provides miraculously to feed his people. And so I can see how you can kind of make a connection symbolically. I don't think the Bible is really specifically making that connection. So these two things are important for what they do in the tabernacle, but I don't think they point to what Jesus is saying in John chapters 6 and 8.
Okay. Yeah. Isn't that interesting though? And something I've loved so much about going through Hebrews is, and this is a word that you taught me, Sonny, a word that I love now, is that intertextuality. Yeah. That you can make connections.
It's a cool word.
It is a cool word. But you can see, like, even with this question itself, that connection of bread and light. Yeah. And even as you were talking about light, all of a sudden I started thinking about, well, actually, the light of the world and pointing back to creation. And it also points forward to the new creation when in Revelation, he's talking about we will not need light because we will have Jesus with us.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is such a cool mixture of everything coming together.
Yep. And I think they are doing those threads. And as you read more of the Bible, that's why I encourage people to, read the Bible and read different parts of the Bible with different people. Meet up with someone and read something you're not doing at church or you're not doing in your uni group or those sort of things, because you will actually begin to see some of those connections together, and read through your Bible. So I know we find the Old Testament sometimes confronting, sometimes boring, sometimes hard, but it's rich. And there's a richness in even these, what we would call boring chapters of the Old Testament, that gives us connections through. Yeah. Sometimes it's names, sometimes it's things like this.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely go ahead and do that, guys. And also just thinking about the richness of Hebrews. We are going through a very rich, dense book in terms of it's bringing up so many things. It's taking us back, it's taking us forward. And it's taken us right now here in the present. We started this journey, and we're about 3/4 of the way through, even about halfway through what we've planned to do in regards to Hebrews. There's still a lot more to uncover. Yeah. But we brought up right at the start a graphic and it's going to come up on the screen. We're going to look at it now. And remind you guys about where we were at and what we're doing. So our graphic shows that
you've got it on your phone.
There's 4 things going on here. So there was the 4 main things. There was the law and the word, the high priest, the sacrifices, and then the tabernacle, the temple. And that's how we kind of decided to sum up Hebrews. And that graphic is still around, so it's still on the page. We can repost it later if you guys want to remind yourselves of it. Senna, can you help us? Because obviously it's easy to get lost in where we're at. Yeah. It's easy for us to be so focused in on perhaps the tabernacle that we've just gone through to forget where we actually are and what we're looking at. So can you kind of just help us out with what have we been through so far in the book of Hebrews, and where are we still about to go?
Okay, I'm not sure I can, but this feels like that moment in The Princess Bride, which is, let me tell you what's going on. No, let me sum up. We've really been looking at how this book unfolds the gospel to people who are steeped in their Old Testaments, people who know their Old Testament very well, who were Jewish Christians. And what he's doing is trying to pick out the big things from their law that are fulfilled in Jesus. And so he picks out these 4 big things. And he picks them out, I think, for a very good reason, because he wants to show that Jesus is at the heart of each one of them. And that's what we're going to see. That's the bottom line of that graphic, if you like. The bottom line that shows Jesus is the one who brings them to fulfillment. And so we saw really the first several chapters, Jesus is the speaker. Jesus is the great speaker from God. And the reason you should listen to Jesus and not stop listening to Jesus is because he is the great speaker. And that was really came to its kind of head in chapters 5 to 6, where he warned them about stop listening, that you've become lazy listeners and basic babies. And so that first big plank there, that God speaks and he's spoken through his son, and so you need to listen to Jesus. And the word he speaks is about these 3 big things, that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament priesthood. And we saw that in Melchizedek. The nature of Jesus' priesthood, why it's better, those 4 big reasons he gave, that Jesus is better than Melchizedek. And now what we're moving into is the last couple of items in that diagram, the sacrifice and the tabernacle. And we've put them the other way around because that's how they appear in the book. And so this last week we've just looked at the tabernacle. And what we did was we actually did the work that Hebrews does as well. We've actually gone back and looked at the tabernacle itself and seen how Jesus fulfills the idea of the tabernacle, that he is the place where we meet with God. And next week we're actually going to go back and look at the Day of Atonement, this idea of the great sacrifice that was made once a year for God's people, and we're going to see how that is fulfilled in Jesus as well. And then the next week we're going to tie those things up together. So that's why we've kind of stepped out of Hebrews, if you like, or stepped kind of just sideways a little bit to get a feel for these two big things. So basically by next week you'll have every plank in that diagram, every basic part of that picture you'll have in place. And what we'll be able to do is tie those things up together. And so that's what we'll do in, I think, 2 weeks' time, is tie all those things together. Why is that important? Because it's about understanding who we are in Jesus and what it means to belong to him, and why you would never, ever want to give up on Jesus. So, yes, I'm not sure if that helps at all. But
no, I think it does help. I think it helps us remind us of what's going on in Hebrews, but also why are we reading it, and what's the point of us reading it. And we're going to keep on uncovering that, and we hope it has been teaching you these things about why do we need to listen to Jesus, why do we need to persevere, and we'll definitely get into that in a couple of weeks' time.
It's funny, in my head I'm all in this Hebrews, and we're all in this Hebrews, but we're actually just beginning now to start thinking about what's next. And so I'm starting, I've got my head around, we're doing the book of Ecclesiastes, and so I'm kind of starting to get excited about that as well. So I'm very excited about Hebrews and what we're doing in it, and there are still some really massive things to come that are really exciting and going to be great to look at together. So please come along next Tuesday night and be a part of the community again. And it'll be great, I think, next week to have that community feel back. And to go live and to have your questions come through live will be fantastic.
Definitely. And perhaps if you want to get ready for next week, as you said, we're looking at the Day of Atonement. So that is Leviticus chapter 16. Perhaps maybe what you want to do over this weekend is actually read Leviticus 16. Have a think about what's actually coming up. What are some of the questions that you have so that you are ready for the talk, you're ready to listen, and if your questions aren't answered, get ready for question time again.
Pile onto us if we don't answer your questions. Feel free to pre-ask as well. So it's fine to post in the group and pre-ask questions for the night. Use any vehicle you'd like there to
definitely.
do that.
But we're very excited to be back live next week. And we're excited to have you guys there, to be seeing your comments, to get back to having our fun and our games and that question time all together. So until then, we are looking forward to it, and we will see you live next Tuesday night.
Catch you later.